Good evening, one and all. We are in the last panel discussion of the second day of Diagnostic Leadership Summit. I would say this is the icing on the cake for all the 2 days of the interaction, because we are talking about embracing intelligence-based devices for informed clinical decision making. We have a very good lineup of speakers for the same. We have Dr. Vidur Mahajan, Associate Director, Mahajan Imaging, Head R&D, Caring, Mahajan Imaging as a moderator. Thanks a lot, Dr. Vidur, for helping us with the moderation and joining in. We have Dr. Satish Prasad Rath, VP, Chief Innovation and Research Officer, Aster DM Healthcare. Welcome, Dr. Satish, to the panel. We have Wing Commander Manoj Kumar Bose, Director Projects, Malla Reddy Health City. Welcome, Mr. Bose. We have Tav Pritesh Sethi, Professor of Computational Biology, IIT Delhi. Welcome, Mr. Sethi. And we have Dr. Vasant Venugopal, Imaging Lead Caring AI. Welcome, Dr. Vasant. We have Mr. Prashant Boria, CA Cure AI. Welcome, Mr. Prashant. And we have Mr. Sudhit Vaidya, CEO Credible Health. Welcome to all the panelists, and over to you, Dr. Vidur, for the session. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Pratibha, and thank you so much to the Elets team for letting me run this panel. And I think we've ended up having like a star-studded panel for this session. And thank you all of you for taking out time. I know I reached out to most of you fairly late, so thank you so much for taking the time. So maybe we have about 1 hour, and all of our panelists have amazing stories to share on the work that they've been doing, their experiences, and on AI specifically. So just to lay context today, we'll spend maybe about 30 to 45 minutes talking amongst us, but the audience, please feel free to keep writing in your questions, and as they keep coming in, we'll either address them on the fly or address them at the end of the session, depending on the nature of the questions. But please keep them flowing, and let's keep the enthusiasm level high. What I'll do is, maybe we'll start with you, Tav. So for those who may not know, Dr. Tav Pritesh Sethi is one of the leading voices in healthcare, AI, and machine learning. Not only in India, but also across the world. He's done cutting edge work in computer vision, predictions, now in COVID as well. I think he's been helping out the government a lot on AI based insights. But Tav, putting on your professor hat, can you tell us a little bit about what is AI, and what is this enigma of deep learning? And most people have seen this, this AI circle, and then there's a machine learning circle, and then there's a deep learning circle. What are these things? How are they different? And maybe you could explain with an example from your work. So over to you, Tav.
Thank you so much, Vidur. No, first of all, thank you for having me in the panel. I'm very excited to hearing others also, and to know about the questions that the audience has. So AI is not AI in healthcare is not something that is really new. It started out with 1980s. From one of the mecca in medicine, which is Stanford, and I think it started out pretty in a pretty, let's say, modest fashion in terms of having decision support systems that can use rules, right? So you can think of artificial intelligence as a replacement for human intelligence, not a replacement, but now we think of it as an enhancement. But can we emulate human intelligence by using algorithms, right? And these algorithms have taken on different forms as we have evolved in our computational development expertise, and also in terms of sophistication, right? So you can think of AI as a superset, which includes a lot of things in terms of the kind of algorithms that can be employed for emulating reasoning, for helping decisions, right? And then basically, which means that you can start thinking about decision trees as also a form of AI. Clinicians tend to think about patients in the form of decision trees. I mean, does the patient have a low glucose or a high glucose? After that, does the patient have a history, family history of diabetes or not? And so on and so forth. In our minds, we are making these decisions, and at each node, we are we are then refining our decisions to the point where we can now say that I can put a diagnosis or I can label the patient at being risk for let's say diabetes or not, right? So that's a very simple form of, let's say, algorithmic decision making. But as we have evolved more in sophistication, algorithms have also gotten more complicated. From this very simple approach of one decision tree to combining multiple decision trees together, just like you would have a panel, just as we have now, right? Making opinions about a particular data point, and then combining the opinions of the panel, you end up with something which looks like a forest. And that is a random forest based model. So basically, looking at this sort of evolution. Similarly, neural networks began quite early, 1950s, 60s, trying to emulate how our brain functions. But these early networks were not really deep. These early networks were maybe two or three layers. The important thing about these networks was that they were able to approximate a lot of complex functions, which linear models, for example, find it hard to approximate, right? And that is what is the attraction of a lot of these models, that we can learn complex functions from data itself. So, and in that perspective, machine learning came in. Random forest is a way of is an approach to machine learning. Support vector machines came in, where we looked at things that can actually be separated out in linear way in higher dimensions, right? So for example, if I'm looking at a snapshot of data, maybe if I resolve out higher enough dimensions, they may become separable by drawing out a line, right?
So,
So
Tav, sorry, just chiming in. So, does that mean that these AI models are able to? So, from a practical standpoint, right? Does it mean that these AI models are able to figure out things themselves? Like we don't need to teach them per se, but you just throw data and they figure out the rest themselves.
so
Uh,
there are, I mean, great question. So there are
and maybe
three
if you
ways.
could illustrate using, an example of your work from, aims that you had done.
Absolutely, sure. No, thanks for that question. So I'll just finish with what deep learning is and come to your question. So the recent AI explosion that has happened, right, has happened because of deep learning. And deep learning is nothing but hundreds of layers of such neurons that you can combine in many complex different ways. And these layers can then have specialized functions. For example, convolutional layers, in the way we have in the way we tend to our brains tend to aggregate function, or attention layers, in the way where our brains tend to focus on some parts of information, right? So now basically we are tending to get close to how our brain has special modularized functions, and then we are replicating these in deep neural networks. So the explosion of data combined with the compute power, because of the Moore's law, we are able to now put a lot of compute that has allowed deep learning, which now is the forerunner of AI technologies. Coming to your question on, can these AI models learn on their own? Yes and no. There are approaches which, for example, can figure out patterns by themselves, which are unsupervised approaches of learning, where you can start discovering patterns and start putting similar data points together, right? Then there are other approaches which we call supervised learning, where the clinicians, for example, can tell this is how a tuberculosis X-ray looks like. Now you go figure, right? And you give the models tons of data and tons of X-rays, and let the models learn that how should a tuberculosis X-ray differ from, let's say, a sarcoidosis X-ray, right? So that's a supervised mode of learning. Then the third way of learning is where you don't even have that kind of data. Maybe you have to do with simulations, and you say this is what we want to maximize. This is our reward. We want to, let's say, minimize the dose of a certain drug and save maximum lives, and this is the environment. Let's say the ICU environment, and let the algorithm figure out what should be the best approach to deliver the drug, just as computers learn to play Mario games, right? So, DeepMind, for example, is a great way, a great sort of an example of how reinforcement learning based simulations have not been able to just learn to play Mario games, but to fold proteins, to defeat the world's best chess players, and to do a lot of things by themselves. In our own
Got it.
example,
Yeah,
in a,
sorry, Tab, maybe we'll come to the example in a bit.
yeah,
I just looked at the clock and I realized, maybe we
right.
should move on. But just to summarize that, so essentially, if you have enough data, or if you have enough data with a kind of a reward that you can give to the or penalty that you can give to the algorithm, you should be able to create a system that can kind of emulate human behavior. Sutirth, I'll bring you in now. No discussion today is possible without discussion of COVID. And we've all seen the role that AI has played in COVID, and I think it's given a great boost to your company. So why don't you quickly tell us all about the work that you guys do at Credible, and how you've been helping radiologists. The story of your pivot, if I may, to the COVID side of things.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Sudhir. Thanks for having me on this panel, and happy to share our experience. So very briefly, just to give you a quick example, a quick introduction. Credible, we are a artificial intelligence for radiology startups. So we build basically AI-based tools on X-ray, CTs, MRIs. Our core focus is a product called Lung IQ, which is basically a product which applies artificial intelligence on chest CT scans and detects multiple different conditions. We cover all the way from lung cancer screening. We look at emphysema, COPD, interstitial lung diseases, and so on. And this is a product that that has been in the works for the last couple of years. We've tried, tested at multiple sites. And deployed it as well. And the core thesis behind the product is that there's a lot of ambiguity in reading a lot of these scans. Many of these findings often get missed. So the core thesis being, can we use AI to help improve, detect them better, quantify them better, and generate detailed reports called the Lung IQ reports. So we were deep into building all of these tools and trying to commercialize them at different sites and doing pilots. It's when basically COVID-19 hit. And what happened coincidentally was that a lot of findings that we were already developing as part of other diseases, for instance, for interstitial lung disease, quite overlapped quite significantly with the findings that appeared in COVID-19. So even before we saw any COVID-19 data, we were able to confidently say that, hey, COVID-19 findings is something that we would be able to pick up. And we actually rolled out our first prototype, having seen just about 10 or 15 actual COVID images, purely based on radiological findings from similar from diseases, fibrotic diseases which had similar presentation, similar findings. We put together a COVID-19 product. At that time, the guidelines were also not clear on what is it that this product will be used for. Will it be for screening? Will it be for diagnostics? But over time, I think it became very clear. The RT-PCR test existed to tell you if you had COVID, yes or no. But the CT scan or a radiology imaging was what is needed to actually tell you what is the severity. A lot of centers used CT wherever they could use CT, wherever they're using X-rays. Many places are using X-rays. What we came in and said was, we could tell you exactly within your lungs how much of each lobe of your lungs is affected with any kind of COVID-19 finding. We were able to do this at remarkable. We were able to do this at a very good accuracy rate. I'd say, we had less than a 5% volume correlation error when we compared it with a radiologist. And so we were able to tell you for each lung lobe what percentage of your lungs is affected with COVID-19, your entire lungs, what percentage of your lungs affected with COVID-19, and instantly give you a COVID.
Sudhir, can you maybe just to give an idea of the scale of this whole exercise. When COVID was at its peak, and we hope that it remains in the past now. How many cases were you guys reading every day?
I think the peak we did was a little over 1,100 cases in one day. I think
So
in the
literally,
last,
your office was doing the work of maybe 20 radiologists.
we had not seen so many cases, and that too, all of these scans come between that narrow gap of between 8 a.m. it starts, and by 2 p.m. all the scans, most of the scans have come in. We've never seen that kind of volumes before. It was just everything was breaking, and hopefully we managed to get it all up. But yes, we were doing in a brief window during September, which was when I think the peak was. We were doing over close to 1,000, some days up to 1,000 cases a day.
Wow, no, that's quite amazing. And just for the audience, if you translate that to gigabytes of data, that's approximately almost maybe 5 terabytes a week or something like that. So yeah, quite a astounding number. Switching over to Prashant, I know that most of the audience may already know Cure.ai. They are kind of India's success story in AI. We are all big fans. So Prashant, I know that during COVID, you guys also pivoted, and I think now you have close to 150 deployments across the world, which is quite crazy. But coming now, looking again at the post-COVID era, right? I know that you guys started off with tuberculosis screening as being one of the key, use cases for AI. So can you, and much of our audience today actually may comprise of pathologists and lab medicine experts. So curious to hear your story on how you combined chest x-rays and gene expert data using AI for tuberculosis. So, I would, I've heard the story before, but I'd love for you to tell it.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Thanks a lot. It's an honor to be here with you. Thanks for inviting me here. And also thanks for the kind words. To introduce myself, I'm Prashant Warrior, co-founder and CEO of CurateAI. We have chest X-ray, HCT, and multiple AI products in the imaging space. And today we are in about 35 countries, processing about 10,000 plus scans on a daily basis and across about 200 sites as of today. And
so I'll just butt in and tell an interesting anecdote. So, they are actually in so many countries, they had to hire translators, which was, quite an amazing insight that, AI company would also need to hire, translators. So, sorry, Prashant, just go ahead. I thought it was a cool thing to tell.
We have now, I think, maybe about 7 or 8 languages in which our solutions are available. So, all of this has happened in the last 1.5 years. But I'll focus on the question that you asked that around TB, right? So the interesting thing is that when you train these algorithms, right, like Dr. Sethi said, that you are basically giving, for us, for example, we build chest X-ray algorithm. So we have a chest X-ray and the corresponding report. And then you use natural language processing to figure out what are the abnormalities mentioned in the report and then train a model on that. So that is the model that you're training. Now, that report is created by a radiologist, right? So there is no way the algorithm can actually go beyond the level of the radiologist using that report. Because finally, that is the barrier, that is the upper bound for that algorithm. But what happens in TB is that a radiologist is not able to diagnose TB completely because radiologists can only find indications of TB. And then you're actually diagnosing TB using a gene expert test or now a MolBio test. It's a microbiological CB-NAT test, nucleic acid amplification test. And that test is supremely accurate. It's like 99% sensitivity for TB, extremely high sensitivity. So what happens is now, rather than training on a radiologist ground truth, you are training that algorithm on a TB ground truth, on a gene expert ground truth. So the algorithm can actually become more accurate than a radiologist using that data. And that is what we did. We had I think maybe about 200,000, 300,000 cases with gene expert positives and negatives. And we trained the model on that. So we had about 3.5 million X-rays and their corresponding reports on which we trained our normal models to detect, let's say, a pleural effusion or a pneumothorax or a nodule and so on. But then we trained the TB model on an additional 200,000, 300,000 cases, which had specific gene expert ground truths. And what we saw is that with that ground truth, right, the algorithm became actually more accurate than a radiologist. And there are multiple studies now conducted by Stop TB Partnership and other organizations, McGill University and Kasturba Medical College in India. So many, I mean, there are probably like 5-6 papers on this now, which show that our algorithm is actually better than a clinician or a radiologist in interpreting TB from a chest X-ray. So that is the possibility that you can actually go beyond human level accuracy by having a data set which is beyond just the radiologist report. And this is now what we're doing also with lung cancer, where we have a lot of biopsy data sets. And again, on chest X-rays, we are able to detect lung cancer better than a human being, better than a human radiologist, because again, we can look at things which a human being may not have necessarily trained on. And this is, again, I mean, you'll probably find radiologists and Dr. Vasant being one of them. I mean, there are many who will do way better than the algorithm, but I think on average, I mean, we do perform significantly better than the average radiologist. And typically TB also is in geographies where there is not, the quality of reads is very poor. I mean, you're talking about a Bangladesh or I mean, a Malawi or even India, I mean, rural parts of India or even urban slums and areas like that, where the quality is very poor. So we are definitely significantly better in those areas.
No, that's super interesting, Prashant. And just again for the audience, just to simplify all of that, essentially, you can think of AI applications in two formats, right? One is where the AI is replicating what a human does, right? Which is essentially finding findings of tuberculosis on chest X-ray, based on what Prashant was saying. But AI, because it can also draw correlations that may not be visible to the human eye, it is possible, and in fact now we're showing that it's not actually possible, it's usable in that format, where you can find features on something as simple as a chest X-ray that you would typically need to run a molecular diagnostic test for, that may cost multiple thousands of rupees. So yeah, so thanks so much for that story, Prashant. We'll come back. Wing Commander MK Bose, sir. So just bringing you in, as somebody who may be looking at procuring AI solutions, or somebody who may be looking at extracting the value out of these solutions, it's amazing technology, it's cool technology, but as someone in that role, sir, could you elaborate on what are some of the points that you think about? What can Prashant and Sudhir do to be more purchasable, if I may, or any other examples from your experience, please? Sir, you are on mute, sir.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, thank you, Dr. Vidur, and good evening to all the panelists. The question put across is, what would I consider in terms of the equipment or any other instruments for the purchase of with the AI inbuilt in it, right? The fact of the matter is that though we have made a lot of progress in the AI, but there are still apprehensions in the mind of the surgeons or the clinicians, or even for the matter of radiologists, because AI, as we know, has two mixtures of it. One is the expert systems and another is the machine learning. Now, if I have to take a machine in terms of helping out a surgeon, I would go in for an expert system, because if he is doing a laparoscopic surgery, or he is doing a knee replacement surgery, or he is doing a spine surgery, he would require a machine or a laparoscope with the inbuilt AI system, which has the expert system in it, AI in it, which would help him in carrying out a surgery better. So that's the first part of it. The second part is, if I'm talking in terms of the diagnostic features, then I would somebody have who would be able to analyze the machine, the inputs that is given into it. Of course, there is a term called GIGO, which we all know, garbage in and garbage out. But then, nevertheless, the pathologist would love to have something in which he would be able to analyze it better, and the machine learning would definitely help him in getting the analysis better and giving him a better result. Now, here I come to a point is that both the sides, when I have interacted with both, whether the surgeon or a clinician, or for the matter of the fact is the pathologist, they have this apprehension still in their mind, is that what is going in and what is getting analyzed and the results coming out is not visible to the human eye, as you, Dr. Vidur, rightly put it across. So there is that apprehension still in the mind that what is going out, and that is what we call the black box medicine. because the surgeon doesn't know, and he's still apprehensive because he needs to know and analyze and explain it to the patient as to what has been analyzed by the machine or the artificial intelligence, whether it is through a machine learning for a pathologist or expert system for a surgeon. Why is he doing this, and what is the benefit that he is going to get out of it? Now, another factor that has to be considered here is the explainability or the transparency in terms of how I go about buying a machine, which will give me that much amount of transparency, wherein I know that there will be no legal hassles that I have to face. In today's world, there are so many instances in terms of the legal hassles that an hospital faces, especially after a surgery. And I have come across it day in and day out, because the general question that is asked by a layman, whether he knows or he pretends to be unknown about it, that just as a person has walked in, how could he drop dead? And though they know that a cardiac arrest can happen at any moment of time, there's still fake ignorance. So we would like to have a machine, when I'm talking about a surgeon, something which would assist him in terms of surgery, in doing an expert system, whether it is a robotic surgery, whether it is a laparoscopic surgery. And when it comes to a pathologist or a radiologist, he has the machine learning inbuilt in it. We can have machines which has the integration of both the terms of expert system and the machine learning. But I would like to differentiate it for a surgeon separately and for a radiologist or a pathologist separately, where he is assisted exclusively by that. The important point here is the explainability, as I spoke about, the transparency in terms of analyzing and telling the surgeon, or giving him that or her the confidence that what is being given him or her as an input from an output from an input is well understood, appreciated, and is explainable to the patient as well as to the patient attenders.
Sir, if I may just ask one cross question at that point. Sir, have you seen any example of any product or software or device that actually is able to meet those criteria as yet, or is that still a wish list, sir?
No, definitely. See, having worked very deeply into the radiology and teleradiology services across especially in Singapore and other areas. I'll give a small example, diverting it. Like when we started teleradiology in Philippines, it was through a small mobile system that we used to have it earlier. And the person in the field would, check the patient and just send out a message in terms of what the symptoms observed, and the doctor on the other side would read that message and give his or her clinical versions. We have traveled a long way from that to the present scenario, wherein the Medtronics, which has the cardiovascular system, which analyzes the patients, which gives the patient a particular time, at which even if the patient doesn't wake up, the machine will automatically do a cardiac reading and send it across to the base computer, from where the data will be drawn out by the cardiologist and analyzed. So this is one of the systems that I very deeply studied, and I've seen it. Then we have seen these robotic surgeries happening, where the computer and the artificial intelligence plays a very deep role. Then we have this mobile, though it is not very prevalent in India because of the PCPNDT rules. I'm talking about the ultrasound machines, which is integrated into your mobile. You just use the probe on your neck, and you can get or on the stomach, and you can clearly get an image of the ultrasound. So these are some of the good machines that I have come across and been put to very good use.
Got it, sir. No, thank you so much, sir. The ultrasound, portable ultrasound is kind of a dream, but we wish the government somehow amends certain rules and allows actually our doctors to carry it around in a pocket, right? It would be
no. The PCPNDT rule is being moderated, and because they have understood that it is the need of the hour, and if they are so stringent about the PCPNDT rule, then we cannot make advancement into this. That way, the robotic surgeries also will not be possible if they're going to be such a stickler with their rules.
Correct.
So the government is taking forward it, and the Philips ultrasound machine is coming forward with the mobile inherent system.
Oh, that's wonderful. No, we'll certainly sync up with the Philips people offline after this. Just bringing Dr. Satish Rath in, sir. So, Dr. Rath, you lead a large organization. In fact, you're a physician who's transitioned to building AI solutions, and and now you're leading innovation at Aster, which is, I think one of the biggest healthcare providers in Middle East and India. How do you think about these things? So, like, how do you think about, like, where do you see earliest the impact of cognitive AI, like like the real deep learning stuff? How do you see that coming into day-to-day practice, and not just research projects? Like, what would be some examples of, or your thoughts in general, sir, please? And also, if you could tell
So,
our audience a little bit about your background, I'm sure people would be it would be very interesting to hear.
first of all, thanks, Vidur, for having me in the panel, and good evening to all the panelists. Yeah, my background is a little bit weird. So I'm a newborn specialist. I'm MD pediatrics with neonatal ICU background, but I chose my career to be into digital research. I have led labs at Philips Research, Intel Labs, built the first wearable of the world, which was multisensory, too early for the time. Last I was before Aster at Xerox Park Lab, heading consumer-centric healthcare. Before that, I was also at Wipro IMEC, building, let's say, remote monitoring solutions. One which was acquired by Z, and one is Infobionics, which is a remote cardiac ICU monitoring solutions, which are doing pretty good on this part. So I will put actually Vidur, that's how, even I posted it in social media that, if we have to see success of AI, it has to be group of people who are knowing both the world, and you have to know physiology and medicine, how it happens, so that the explainability of the physiological model is there. And same way, I think the doctors also need to understand what are the basics of AI, where data is coming, where it is flowing through the neurons, and why deep learning is better than, let's say, traditional machine learning, and how this can be used. So I somewhere feel is there is responsibility of two sides, but it should be taken by the healthcare organizations or the doctors first. So there is this problem of solving the overburden, where work is actually too huge and doctors are actually too less. Let's say, just taking radiology as an example. So ideally, it should start as a second opinion, let's say, enhancer. This is actually for Predable as well as CurateAI. How do you actually tell it? You ideally should not tell that, this is doing better than the radiologist. There is a behavioral economics what actually comes into picture. If the person who is sitting on the other side of the table, who is a radiologist, or maybe, or a senior, let's say, functionary from a hospital who might not be exposed to, let's say, AI and other solutions, which is the reality, you should be saying you are seeing 10,000 maybe images today in your big organization, and this is the cost and this is the quality per scan, and I can do a much better job where your radiologist can actually be much more productive. So that's a basic, I think, difference I see. And we saw a large, study which happened in Japan, where we were working with Fuji, and when it came to all, the algorithms are doing great, but when you ask the doctors, okay, are you going to adopt it? Then they say no, but still it is just doing the morphological aspects of it, and then we cannot actually, it cannot do these things. That's why maybe it's nice to have, but good for research and not for, let's say, day-to-day stuff, because the liability still stays with the doctor. So there, I think my message to the AI companies is, you should be saying that you are making it better for the radiologist, easier for the radiologist. The world is never going to get enough radiologists to consume the kind of data which is coming out, right, with number of hospitals, number of devices, number of portable devices which are coming out. But there, I think you need to also look for how are you upgrading your algorithms. So the other part, what I call typically this ECG problem, right? Many times we invent a ECG device, then we think, okay, we have solved the cardiological problem. So ECG is just one mere parameter out of maybe 100 parameter on which a doctor actually diagnoses a cardiac condition. So once you have a ECG, it's actually wrong to think that it is actually going to solve your cardiological problem. Same way, once you have a AI reading of a chest X-ray or a MR or a ultrasound, unless it has got correlations, let's say like you have the genetic correlation, you have the behavioral correlation, you have the phenotypic correlation, then you can have explainability of AI. So start with something which is a second opinion, and then say that this is how it is going to solve your today's problem, and that is enough market, and very big market. And then start going across the parameters, like from genotype till phenotype, and how much of more, let's say, parameters you can include into your training model, as well as explainability of it. And the world is going to, let's say, follow it through slowly. It is actually not very smart to have that frustration that, okay, my algorithm can do better than the pathologist and the radiologist, but why the doctors are not getting it? But because the doctors are trained over 20 years of time, when you say somebody is a better doctor than the other doctor, it is only that, they have developed their own algorithm. Because of variety of data what they are exposed to, they have developed their algorithm. The moment the patient is actually walking to a room, they observe from the gait, from their clothes, what is the socioeconomic status, what language they are speaking, so what food they might be taking. All these are actually parameters, which we don't consider. So when we are developing our AI algorithm, also, the more diverse set of data you can collect to come to a conclusion, that is going to actually have that, let's say, translation between AI scientists and the doctors. So I would say start with second opinion as a service, which is actually needed by the doctors. So let's say, at Aster also we are looking for, as we have consolidated all our radiological services, we are sitting on huge amount of data, and we don't have so many radiologists actually to do this part. And this can be only solved with AI. Now, because I am there, maybe, I'm starting the project to say, yes, all my mundane tasks are going to be taken care by AI. So maybe you have to find people like me in those organizations who can actually talk to you about AI, and so that, you will start with the second opinion services. But slowly, I think you need to partner with the hospitals also, wherever you are selling them as a service. How are you developing explainability or transparency into your AI models? Because, whatever you have built, there is a big dilemma at FDA that once you publish something as a version, as FDA, certified algorithm, you have stopped there. You're not learning anything, beyond that. So you should be partnering with hospital to say, yes, I have developed a version 1.0 for, let's say, tuberculosis or COVID or, let's say, pneumonia. But as I'm learning continuously with the customer, can I create a research site that, I'm keeping on improving my performance metrics out of it? So at Aster, actually, we are trying to build something like that, where not only will be using your algorithm as a customer, but also will be providing those insights that, hey, there is a new, parameter which can come out of this. So this is, I would say, is going to be, the, area ahead. And this is quite promising. I think, that is one of the reasons, why I joined a provider. This is my first hospital role, because I feel where the data is, that is going to be, where the future is.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Rath. And it's quite amazing that that statement. Being a neonatologist, this is the first hospital you've joined. So that. But I think if like one key takeaway from that is that you need to pick your battles as you are building AI, right? You need to see, do I automate the easiest tasks, or do I automate the toughest tasks? And that's one framework that we also think of, right? We think of in radiology, at least, pre-scanning AI, then scanning AI, and then post-scanning AI. And typically, pre-scanning is administrative, scanning is, more image acquisition, so more image analytics, and then post-scanning is cognitive, where, you're literally looking at the images and trying to figure out what the diagnosis is. So, sir, you'd like to say something?
If I can,
yes.
Yeah, if
please,
I can
please.
just add one more line, right? And this is very, very important for, Credible as well as Prasant, right? So you are telling to the CEOs or the CFOs that, you are making maybe $1 million now, I'm going to make it $1.5 million, the way you are conducting your operations. See, as BPOs are happening, shared services things are happening, the first acquisition is going to be always like that. It is the second opinion where you are giving them productivity, you are improving them, have their cost margins as well as, increase their business. Go to the medical levels, in parallel. So you should be knowing what is your first market, build your credibility, and nobody asking a Apple or a Samsung that give me explainability how your camera works in night mode, or let's say how it works in the stutter mode, right? Maybe the doctors will take time. You have to understand that they are not trained on AI. Very few people even confuse now teleradiology with AI. So instead of battling that, you should be understanding what is your first market, which is huge, which is really, really big. And then I think, pick your next battle, with good research partnership with long-term players.
No, and in fact, sir, that's so interesting because we are at a diagnostics conference, and the heart and soul of diagnostics, which is biochemistry, immunoassay. I doubt anybody knows once you put in the blood sample what really happens to it, and you truly just end up trusting the number at the end, right? So, so I think it's a lot about trust, which is appropriate moment to bring my colleague Dr. Vasant Venugopal on board. So Vasant, why don't you share, what you're up to, and how do these AI solutions finally come into hospitals, right? Like there's so many people building so many things, and so many people wanting to use all these things. Like how does that gap get addressed? And then we started getting questions, so we'll move to that part.
Yeah, sure, Vidur. Thank you so much for having me on the panel. And this is a very well-balanced panel, Vidur. Like I can see developers of AI on one side and consumers of AI on the other side, and there is an academician. So it's probably the most balanced panel to discuss about AI in diagnostics. And to answer your question, how will these solutions be brought into the clinical environment? The panelists have very well discussed about three things. One is, right, the solution should be simple, right? It should be very simple to for the clinicians to access it and start using it, and it should be secure, right? They should have a feeling that the data which is being handled by the system is following certain protocols. The data, they can track the movement of data through the system. And the third is what I call sagacity, or the ability to explain what's the process that's being done by the AI solution using on our data. So all these things are the primary problems that need to be addressed for bringing the AI solution into the practice. I will take a brief moment to go back and explain my journey, or our journey as a team in this domain. Like about 2 years back, when the AI boom was happening, we being the Mahajan Imaging and Caring being one of the leading diagnostic chain in the country, started getting approached with several AI groups and companies to test their solutions and give feedback. And if you find it useful, start using them. The major problem which we faced is, how do I interact with these solutions in a uniform manner, right? One of the solutions asked me to push the system to a cloud and then sends back the report in an SMS, in an email, and then different portals, I need to involve several peoples to send these solutions, and even to analyze those results. I need to take help of computer scientists, statisticians, and so many people. That's when we started thinking that if there is a single platform kind of gateway to the AI solutions, where people can easily access, assess, and adopt AI, that would be one of the things which can fasten bringing the AI into the clinical domain. That's when the Carpal, the entire idea of Carpal, the Caring Analytics platform, was formulated and used. You can see behind me those colorful boxes. They actually host Carpal, and they're actually, as we speak, running some of the AI solutions, and then I'm validating a couple of them using different projects. So what I do is, I have the solution which is this platform, which is housed inside my setting, right? It's on-premise setting. You can use this on cloud system also, but I feel secure in this way. It's faster for me. So I pull data from my pack systems. I identify an algorithm which I need to validate, and then I send the data to the algorithm. The algorithm processes that data and sends back results. And I myself, taking help from some of my colleagues, establish what we call as the ground truth for those diagnostic tests. And then I compare the results of the algorithm to the ground truth, and I draw inferences, right? What's the performance of this particular algorithm on my data? And so I get convinced, right? Okay, this particular algorithm works perfectly fine for my solution. Now it's the time for me to deploy it in real clinical world, right? Which will be the radiologists who are reporting scans across our 8 or 9 centers. So that's the way we started doing things, right? We have a mini kind of internal validation scheme. We have set rules. We have a platform. We use all these things, and once we test and we are convinced that it's very useful, it improves time, it's accurate enough to be deployed in a clinical environment, we deploy it, and then we get feedback from the field. So I think that's how it should be done.
So basically, Vasant, if I was to summarize what the Carpal platform does, or what like our vision is that doctors at hospitals should have a mechanism to interview the AI, right? Like if the AI is truly going to do the work of an assistant, then I'm sure everyone here would agree that you may not really hire an assistant because your friend said that it's a great person. You will still have that one conversation and try to figure out what that person's good at, what they're not good at, and then try to give feedback to the person to make them better. So that is kind of the approach that we are applying, and it's a little out there, but we'll see what it comes to. I guess we can move to anybody wants to add anything before we move to questions. We are getting I'm sure all of you can see these questions, but or anyone want to add something? Yes, Mr. Bose, please.
Yeah, the main factor that we are seeing, which is important in the implementation of AI in a full-fledged form, as you rightly put it across, is the trust that needs to be developed between the clinician and the machine that he or she is working on. Because as you said, that when at the end of the day, when you put in a sample inside the machine and the assay goes through, you do not know what exactly is happening inside the machine and what the results. You have to basically trust that result that comes out and fully take convincing answers to it and give it to the patient and the attender, saying that whatever has been diagnosed or whatever has been analyzed is absolutely correct. So there has to be a trust, which is a triangular trust, the trust between the clinician, the surgeon, and the machine or the radiologist, and the trust of the patient with the doctor, believing that whatever he or she has interpreted out of that machine and the machine has given the answer is absolutely good for myself, and I can trust that. So the trust factor,
which is sir, actually a great segue to the first question, right? I'm not sure if you were answering that in itself, but the question reads, how will the Indian population react to faceless doctors, right? Like from a patient satisfaction standpoint. So anybody, as the patient can never be satisfied unless a physical meeting is done. I don't know. Has COVID changed that opinion at all in all of your and anybody who wants to answer that?
COVID, in fact, has put in more amount of fear in the minds of people, to coming to the hospital, and that probably would help in a big way, because with the RT-PCR being the bottom line of telling a person whether he is positive or negative, and here positive or negative has a different connotation, because here negative is good and positive is bad. So I think slowly the humans will start believing more in the machines and that the results it is giving out than the human touch or the physical touch that the doctor gives to a patient in front of the patient, physical presence.
Prashant, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was going to just.
Yeah,
I was just going to say that I think, I personally, my family, my paraplegic father lives with me, my 70-year-old mom lives with me, and I have a cared wife. We have not gone to the hospital in the last 1 year. Every consultation has been online or on phone. And I know a lot of people like that. And I would say, we don't want to go to the hospital. Why should we? Because if it's a consultation can be done at the home using your phone, why not? So obviously, and there is a lot of investment also happening into these telehealth platforms. So I see a radical shift in physical interaction to maybe telephonic and app-based interaction with the doctors. Now, of course, for surgeries and more serious conditions, you would still want to go to the hospital. But I think for a lot of the things, especially maybe mild conditions, you might just take it from home right now, is my sense.
I also will add it in the right way, but I think it is again regarding that behavioral economics, right? How do you put it? So diagnosis is just not one interaction between the patient and the doctor. Before a diagnosis is happening, there are layers of things, which are happening. It's like, you get a bank loan, but before that you have to give so many documents. So all these things which are mundane, but, which are very protocol driven, can be done through telehealth or through computers, right? So the moment you say this is faceless, or let's say this is, doctorless, or this is replacing the doctor, you are still going to fight the system, which is changing very, very slow. So, I'm wearing both the hats as a doctor as well as the AI scientist. So we should be really looking for that, difficult, bureaucratic, slow, mundane, let's say clerk-driven system, which is happening before the final diagnosis is done. For the final diagnosis, you still would need a doctor because of the liability as well as, giving their opinion. But all these other things, which is before the final diagnosis is happening, can be very well taken care by the computer systems. And again, these are not unsupervised learning. These are typical supervised rule-based engines, and which is still not solved, right? So I think we should be moving it in that way. If we see actually in the world, what really took up is primary care. Let's say the chatbots like K3 Health, Yo.MD got, great actually adoptions. On the other side, what really got actually, the real needed boost is mental health. So you would see, so much of, investment has gone into mental health, and even mental health startups are now valued more than $1 billion. Now you can think like this, right? You have the radiology, AI startups or the big companies, which has got so much of an investment going into it, and suddenly you see few mental health startups which have been started getting funded as well as valued as $1 billion. So that's where actually understanding the balance, that what is missing and what can go as the first market, so that we are serving the need. And we are very happy that we are able to serve the mental health need through AI, which is being adopted by the patients as well as by the doctors, because there is such a big gap which is staying. Now, if I see as the AI scientist, it is so difficult compared to all my, let's say, CBIR protocols and unsupervised learning, and having a very expensive GPU stack to run my AI algorithms. Maybe not, right? But it is again balancing, what is missing out there, what can be your first market, where you can successfully take the patient and the doctor also to your side. So that messaging is very important. Doctors are going to stay, they are going to do the critical stuff, they are built for that. But there are a lot of non-critical things, mundane things, bureaucratic things, which can be first taken care by AI, so that you are building your credibility, then try to, let's say, assist the doctors with the augmented system. Maybe a long
Got it,
answer,
sir.
but I just wanted to keep it.
No. In fact, one of those examples of a mundane task that we've kind of automated using the most basic of it, we can't even call it AI, is text matching, right? In patient records, on one side you have Vidur Mahajan, on the other side you have Dr. Vidur Mahajan, and then it's just everything goes haywire. But you mentioned, Dr. Rath, the issue of liability, and that brings us to the second question that we have, which maybe an appropriate closer for the session as well, is that what happens if AI gives a wrong diagnosis, right? Who is to blame? Physical doctor can be questioned, but how will we question the AI algorithm?
Yeah.
So anyone who wants to take that?
So I mean, I can take that, Vidur. I think I mean there are 10,000 scans that we process from around 35 countries today, and we are C certified, FDA cleared, all of those. But every one of those scans, I mean X-rays or CT scans, are then read by a doctor. So we are not providing the final diagnosis in any of those cases, right? And AI is only an assistive tool. So I don't think in any country today, I mean, while obviously, I mean, we'll reach a point where, just like you said, right, for these, for the blood test or simple things, where a machine is providing the readout and then you're signing on top of that. I think radiology will also get there at some point. But today, the fact is that somebody is reviewing that before it goes out, and every country requires a physical signature by a radiologist before that report is given out to a patient.
So Prashant, and to everyone else, we are also seeing this interesting move of AI companies becoming teleradiology providers as well. Strategy aside, do you think it makes sense from a liability perspective to do that? Anyone here? Or like, let's say, Aster sets up a teleradiology practice that is heavily AI driven. But then, Aster is able to say that, okay, we will take liability for the mistakes, and, you don't need to secondary. Do you think that may be a quicker way of driving adoption? Like, again, question, because at the end of the day, the panel is about adopting AI. So,
Yeah, it's I would say natural, right? See, why you go for teleradiology again, that is consolidation as well as efficiency. So you are actually out of 20 centers, you are actually consolidating to one center because now you have connectivity. So you are doing the same load of work with less number of people. Okay. Then you are just moving to AI because now you can still further process much more larger data with same number of people or maybe a marginal addition of people, right? So I see it as a natural progression. But whenever we say that, you are using AI to improve your efficiency, you're not using AI to say that, AI is doing the diagnosis and I'm no more using doctors. The liability always has to stay with the doctors so that the trust between a patient and a doctor or a healthcare system stays. It is up to the hospitals or the healthcare networks to identify models. How do they improve their efficiency, which is an internal stuff. I cannot say as master that, you should not come to me. I'm going to deploy AI algorithm and it is going to treat you. I still have to take that ownership to say, this is my system. I certify it. I'm using this to help my doctors better their diagnosis and reduce their errors, right? But end of the day, as a hospital provider or as a doctor, I'm actually responsible for my patient. So it is about the healthcare organizations or the doctors to cater more and more patients in a better way with quality and other things, where AI is just going to be one more tool to help them doing that. So I think, that would be our approach.
Got it. Yeah, Vasant, please.
Yeah, just kind of closing remarks. I guess it's time for closing remarks. The one thing which we all need to understand, in fact, the general public has also started understanding that all of the tests have a thing called sensitivity, specificity, and there is a proportion of errors that's going to come in. Right? People have seen it in COVID testings. COVID test of the health minister of Delhi goes wrong, and people are fine with it. The first test, antigen test, goes wrong, and then the RT-PCR comes in, and everything is clear. It's not a big news that the test is done wrong, the test is error. People understand that that test has a limitation, that has a particular sensitivity and specificity. Similarly, there has to be an understanding between the users of AI, consumers of AI, healthcare providers, and the patients. Everybody will understand when this ecosystem develops that there is going to be a certain proportion of errors that's going to happen. It's not going to be 100% ever, and we have to kind of put in all our best efforts to avoid those errors. But still there is going to be some error, and at that point, whatever the error mitigation mechanisms are being followed in hospitals or healthcare systems will still need to be followed. But just because a system is not 100%, is not an argument against not using it.
So just to add to that, there is an interesting part I just wanted to bring it in. So in FDA, actually the discussion is on the different side. It's not about if the AI algorithm is wrong, then who is liable. It is always the user who is liable. The same applies to the medical devices and the other softwares, right? Once they are certified, then whoever is using it is actually liable. On the other side, the question is coming, if the AI would have predicted about a disease, but the doctor actually has overwritten it, and that the condition actually came out to be correct and the patient has died, then who takes that, blame? Is the doctor going to say that, because if you would have used AI, then you could have saved this person? So how that to be covered? That is a gray zone which is being discussed now. So this is a dynamic area. I would just say to stay optimistic, but just to add to, let's say, Vidur and Vasant, right? I would say educating the ecosystem is also responsibility of the guy who are making that business. You cannot say that, doctors are not understanding. That's why, maybe my solution is not getting adopted. You have to come together. So the doctors and the technologists, as Wing Commander was also saying, right? It has to be the triangular, let's say, system building thing. One good area is, maybe I invite all of you. We are building a data bank where we are collating all our data and we are keeping it on a compliant manner. And we intend to invite and help startups who are making AI products out of it. And we want to build it together with you. So we are just not going to be a consumer of your services and to be critics of your services. We want to build it so that once hospitals start building it along with the technologies, then you are on the other side, right? You are no more a critic, you are the builder. So if it is not working, even I am responsible. So this is an open invitation. We are building maybe Asia's first federated learning, secure, all encompassing data bank at all our, hospitals. And we see 20 million patients, every year. So that's not simple. And we see from, pharmacy to, let's say, primary clinic to secondary clinic to tertiary clinic to quaternary clinic. So we have the volume, we have the variety. But the purpose of the innovation team is to build a data bank which will help AI companies come, on top of it. So
Got
maybe,
it.
that's
Got
what
it.
I wanted to say there.
No, sir, that's a beautiful note to end on. So, if you're a AI startup, or if you're a doctor wanting to build AI, or if you're any of, if you just want access to data, get after Dr. Rath's life, and and very soon you might get it. So, with that, thank you so much, everyone. We learned about what AI is. We learned about the role of AI in COVID and tuberculosis, how to buy it, how to test it, how to deploy it, and lastly, answered questions around liability and then data access. So thank you so much to the Elets team for letting me do this, and thank you to all the panelists for taking out time on a Saturday evening. You could have been doing much more fun things, but I also noticed that most of you are in office. so, but no, thank you so much, and I hand it over to you, Pratibha.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Bidur, for moderating the session, and it was a very well-rounded session on AI. Yes, we were talking about embracing AI, not just in diagnostics. I think in every walk of life, AI is going to be there. We can't do away with it. You like it, not it's gonna be there. I know it's a Saturday evening. Please give us 5 more minutes. We are wrapping up the session. This is the last session, so we would like to do the vote of thanks as well. So I would like Deepak. Can we have Mr. Karthik if he is joined? Yeah.
Good evening, all. Good evening. Thank you, Pratibha. And I would
Karthik is
like,
the associate editor. He heads the government, health, and pharma vertical in Elets Technomedia. Over to you, Karthik.
thank you, Pratibha, and thank you all the eminent panelists. I was actually watching this panel discussion from backstage, and it was really interesting. And it was the last session, but believe me, it was not a boring session. It was actually a very interesting session, and people will like it. And nothing could be better than this to end this 2-day conclave. And it is our honor to have more than 70 experts and leaders of diagnostics industry in this 2-day conclave, and more than 500 delegates were regularly watching this conclave. And all these sessions we had, if I'm not wrong, we had 12 sessions in these 2 days. And it is really a good there might be learnings also for us, but it was actually a good experience for Elets. From last 2 decades, we are doing a lot of healthcare conclaves on various topics, various subjects, and diagnostics was also a part of our conferences, virtually and physical conferences. But it is the first time that we focused a 2 days conference totally on diagnostic industry. It was a great experience. And I would also like to thank our partners as well, who have supported us in bringing this up, and various issues discussed. And we realize that yes, there's a need of discussion, and I think this is not the end. From these discussion, we realize that there are there's a more scope of more discussion around the future prospects of diagnostic industry, the technology interventions in this industry, and how it is shaping up after COVID-19. So various things, and we will be definitely coming up with the new edition in after some good time. And we'll again request for your participation. And before we wrap up, Pratibha, can we present the speaker certificates as a token of respect and appreciation? And as the moderator said that we would have done some more interesting thing also in Saturday evening. So sparing time in this Saturday evening, we just respect to all of you. So please present the certificates, Pratibha. Dr. Vidur Mahajan.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dr. Bidur Mahajan, for moderating the session and always helping, in particularly the eHealth team, whenever we come out with a summit by helping us with speakers or whatever we come run up to you, you are there available. Thanks a lot for that.
Thanks, Pratibha. Always a
Dr.
pleasure.
Satish from Aster DM Healthcare, thanks a lot, sir, from coming up and giving your inputs. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wing Commander Manoj Kumar Bose from Mallareddy Health City. Thanks a lot, sir, for joining and giving your thoughts.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
sir.
And Mr. Tavi Pritesh Sethi from IIT Delhi. Thanks a lot, Mr. Sethi, for joining in and giving your inputs as well.
Thank you.
And Dr. Vasant Venugopal, the imaging lead of Caring AI. Thanks, Dr. Vasant, for coming in and giving your inputs.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And Mr. Prashant Waria, CEO of Cure AI. Thanks a lot, Mr. Prashant, for coming in and sharing your thoughts as well. And Mr. Sudhit Vaidya, CEO of Credible Health. Thanks a lot, Mr. Vaidya, for coming in. Thanks a lot to each one of the panelists. We'll keep bothering you, especially Dr. Vidur. We'll definitely bother you for upcoming summits. Please help us with. We need your continued support. And I also want to take 1 minute for thanking my team colleagues, Mr. Sunil, Douglas, Nehal, Vikram, Deepak, who's in the back end still, and all the other people, Mr. Milmoy, everybody who was in the back end who was helping us to put out the summit. Without you all, this was not possible. And I would like to sum up by saying thanks to Dr. Ravi Gupta, who has always been supportive for each and every endeavor we do. Thanks a lot to everyone. Thank you.
And we are coming
Thank
up with
you.
a pharma summit in end of April. We'll keep updating you. Please join us there as well. And again, our partners, NABL, Abort, our presenting partner, True PCR, J Mitra, and yes, so this is the Pharma Leadership Summit on 29th and 30th April. Again, we'll be discussing on digitization in pharma sector. Request you all to be there. And as we come to our partners, again, I would just like to name the partners. NABL, our presenting partner, Abort, True PCR, J Mitra and Company, Ciralio Health, Vijaya Diagnostics Center, Newburgh Diagnostics. Thank a lot for helping us and supporting us in putting up this show. And here we close it. Thank you again to all of you. Thank you so much.
Bye.